All right, well, I think we can go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for joining us this morning. Hopefully you're cooking along with us. A couple people are, and you'll have a nice little brunch side dish ready to go by the end of this. But first I want to thank Greg and David for taking the time this morning to join us. We're excited. 412 Food Rescue just hit a really big landmark that I'm sure David will talk about. So excited to hear more. I also want to thank our sponsors, People's Gas, Giant Eagle, Highmark Health, and UPMC Health Plan. And especially for the cooking series, Number One Cochrane, who is donating $250 to 412 Food Rescue's mission. So we're thrilled to be able to make that donation. And with that, I'll turn it over to David. He's going to take us through the food rescue. Thanks.
Thanks, Allison. I'm David Neimanis. I am our Partner Experience Manager at 412 Food Rescue. I'm going to pull up a screen over here to kind of give you a little bit of context for what we do at 412 Food Rescue, just so everyone can familiarize themselves. All right. So 412 Food Rescue was founded as a direct response to the fact that 40% of the food on our planet goes to waste, while 1 in 7 Americans are experiencing food insecurity. There was this thought that there needed to be some sort of way for us to address these two problems because they are directly related to one another. If this much food is being wasted, how are we not getting this food to those who need it? So we started working with restaurants, catering companies, grocery stores, food distributors, and finding ways that we could redirect that food directly to those who need it. And this is a bigger problem than just feeding people and wasting food. Food waste is one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gases on our planet. We use a tremendous amount of our water, tremendous amount of land and energy and landfill space growing food that's never consumed. And it's become a very, very inefficient system for us as a nation and as a planet. So what we do is, like I was alluding to before, we work with restaurants, catering companies, grocery stores, distributors, whatever it may be. And we do have a fleet of 412 Food Rescue trucks that are refrigerated trucks. They pick up large quantities of food directed to non-traditional nonprofits, which could be housing sites, after-school programs, homeless shelters, that type of thing. And that is about half of our operation. So 50% of our food gets sent out in our trucks. However, there's a lot of small amounts of food that kind of slip through the cracks. And that's something we wanted to address at 412 Food Rescue. And that's how we enabled ourselves a volunteer fleet. So think about a restaurant, maybe it's Sunday. They have 2 cases of tomatoes. They're closed Monday. They don't feel like these tomatoes are going to look as good as they want them to on Tuesday, but they're still perfectly edible. That's not going to warrant sending this truck out there. So we needed to find a way to get a smaller fleet that could kind of find these smaller areas of food waste and prevent them from slipping through the cracks. So then we enabled our own volunteer fleet and eventually created our own mobile app called the Food Rescue Hero app. The way the Food Rescue Hero app works is very, very similar to DoorDash, Uber, Lyft, any of those things, where you hop onto the app, you'll see an icon around the city. It'll tell you about an available food rescue. Here's an example showing it's coming from Fresh Grocer. It gives you a time frame that you need to pick the food up. But once you claim that rescue, it'll link up to your navigation software and allow you to get to that specific pickup location, put the food into your car, and then deliver it directly to a nonprofit. And in doing that, we have been able to get more than 8,000 volunteers out on the road. We've been able to, as Allison was alluding to earlier, recently we've surpassed rescuing 10 million pounds of food, which is very exciting for us since we've only been in operation since 2015. And this has been a really scalable, sustainable way to prevent these small areas of food waste from falling through the cracks. Does anybody have any questions on this side of things? Because this is our day-to-day operations, kind of what we were founded on. However, there's a lot more programming that goes into what we do right now, especially in COVID era.
I could just sort of pop in and say that I think it's really cool that you guys are integrating sort of tech into what you're doing as a nonprofit, because since Pittsburgh is such a heavy sort of tech city, as someone who's really interested in the nonprofit side of things, it's cool to see that crossover sort of happening. So just pointing that out.
Appreciate that. And yeah, it's a really powerful tool to have, and we're really proud that we built it in Pittsburgh, and also the fact that we're now able to license our technology to other cities. So right now our technology is being used in Northern Virginia, Philadelphia, Cleveland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and recently Vancouver. So the idea is to keep expanding to additional cities and finding other organizations similar to 412 Food Rescue and implement our technology into their operations to reduce food waste. So yeah, so when the COVID-19 pandemic kicked into gear, we realized that there was going to be a drastic change in what we do for a number of reasons. One, there's more people experiencing food insecurity than usual. And additionally, there were just different protocols that were going to have to be put in place. And we wanted to make sure everybody was safely delivering food and that we were kind of keeping a pulse on how food was getting from point A to B as best as possible. We also wanted to ensure that we were keeping those receiving food as safe as possible at any point of the way. So we had to get a little creative. And one way that we started doing this, we were looking at industries that were being affected by the pandemic. And one of the obvious industries that has been impacted by this is the restaurant industry. And a lot of restaurants were closing. They were experiencing some hardships of their own, but there was an overwhelming amount of support from restaurants of people wanting to cook food, use their kitchens, use their talents. And a lot of people were, just using food that they were using their own money on, and it was coming out of their pockets to feed our communities. So we began raising money to find creative ways to feed people directly with the food that these restaurants were making. So the community takeout program allowed us to buy meals directly from restaurants at $10 a meal. And for every $10 spent or every $10 donated, we were able to have a restaurant create a meal and then redistribute that in our community. And in doing so, we've we've produced about 18,000 meals in doing so. And some of those being home deliveries, which was a really exciting thing about what we've been able to do recently is in the past, we've only delivered to nonprofits. And as of recent, we've been able to deliver directly to people's homes. And this has been a great way to keep, vulnerable populations who maybe shouldn't be leaving the house too often at home and getting this food directly to doorsteps in that way. Additionally, another industry that was impacted by this pandemic is the agriculture industry. So the USDA came out with a grant where they were buying food directly from farms and then redistributing it to those who can get food out to people who need it, like 412 Food Rescue. So on a daily basis right now, we're receiving large amounts of fresh produce in boxes that look like this and able to distribute them either similar to what I was saying before with the home deliveries direct to people's homes to nonprofits. And we've also been doing drive-up distributions as well. So families can pull up their cars, get in line and pick up some fresh produce that is supporting farmers and also preventing it from going to waste. Recently, another program that is kicking into gear next week is Ugly CSA. So another avenue of this, and this is kind of on the agriculture side of things, is food waste does burden farmers. So a lot of what happens is there are certain types of foods that don't have necessarily sellable markets. And produce is kind of a tricky area of this avenue because sometimes grocery stores don't want to buy produce if it's misshapen, like this strawberry here. They might not want to buy produce if it's too big, too small. And we've found a way to find new markets for this. So community supported agriculture, CSA, is a way that supporters can support farmers by having a subscription service to any sort of food, and in this situation, produce. So our subscribers, once a week, they receive a box of fresh produce from our local farmers, and it's all food that has been deemed unsellable. So like I said, misshapen, too big, too small, or more often than not, just excess. It's actually kind of funny. In the past, we've had subscribers that have complained and saying that the food isn't ugly enough. So this has been a valuable way to find new markets for this food. Another ugly but beautiful pair right here. Yeah, and that is Ugly CSA. And then we're running a lot of other programs right now. We're going to talk a little bit more about what we're doing in Millvale with Greg and Marissa, who are on the line here. Before doing that and before fielding some questions, I did just want to share a quick video to give you an idea of what it's like to get involved, because being a food rescue hero is a very easy process. It requires downloading the Food Rescue Hero app. Once you download the app, you'll complete a food safety training. And once you've done that, you're ready to go out there and rescue food. So I kind of just want to give you an idea of what that might be like.
I am a mother, I am a wife, I am an entrepreneur, I am a thinker outside of the box. I am created and destined to give more than I receive.
I'd rather give than get stuff in return. I think they'd probably say that's a big part of my nature.
I want to be part of making us a better place for grandchildren and for great-grandchildren.
This has been a problem for a long, long time. And for some reason, America has just became a country of throwing stuff out. Like the minute something's not useful anymore, just toss it out. Instead of going like, could I give this to somebody?
412 Food Rescue is the missing link between people that sell food, have food, make food, but for some reason that food is usable but not saleable. And it's the missing link between those people and people who need food and don't have enough food. Senior centers and housing authority, public assistance, that kind of thing. And most of that food is perishable items.
When you read that 1 in 7 people in your county are suffering from food insecurity, that feels really powerful. Like 1 in 7 is a huge number. None of my friends have food insecurity. So that means there's all these other people out there that you don't know walking around the sidewalk that don't know where their next meal is going to come from or don't know if they're going to have fresh food in a week or two.
You don't realize how much food is wasted until you see your car totally stuffed to the gills with food that people pick up every day.
It's such an easy thing to do that it would feel like a shame to not do it. And it makes such a difference to people. I can't think of another way I could spend my time with so little effort to have so much impact.
You can just take a few minutes out of your day to do it. It really contributes to the cause.
I do 412 Food Rescue because I've been there before. I used to be a client at the East Liberty Family Support Center, and fast forward to 6-7 years later, I'm now doing a 412 Food Rescue trip where I'm able to give them a donation of food that I've rescued from a restaurant.
I think it's one of our big world problems. We have so many. I think this is one I can be helpful with. You know, I'm not a politician, I'm not a financier, I'm none of that, but I can transport food.
So yes, so that's generally kind of gives you an insight as to what it's like being a food rescue hero. We have, sorry about that. We have over 10,000 people who've downloaded the app, and it's really, really easy to get involved in. I kind of just threw a lot of information at you right now. I'd love to start fielding some questions for me right now. It looks like we have a few over here.
Hey, David, can you talk, not everyone is from Pittsburgh. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, is 412 looking to expand to other markets or kind of what the plan is moving forward?
Yeah, so kind of noted before when Dustin brought up his question, or at least his comment. So our technology is being used in other cities at this point in time. 412 Food Rescue is our Pittsburgh brand. 412 is the area code of Pittsburgh. But we do have a national brand called Food Rescue Hero, and it is the Food Rescue Hero app. And essentially the way this works is we license our technology out to other cities that want to implement this into their cities. So we're in Northern Virginia right now, Cleveland, Philadelphia, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Vancouver. And we're trying to continue expanding this. The goal right now is to be in 100 cities by 2030. So that's really the model that we're branching out from right now. Does anybody have any questions? Like I said, I know I threw a few programs out there between home deliveries, community takeout, Ugly CSA, and just the general food rescue hero operations. Anything that I can speak to more to clarify on?
I also just want to jump into, I've done the Ugly CSA in the past, not through 412, through another farm share program. And it's such an awesome way to get different produce too. I'd get things in my basket that I never bought at the store before. So it was kind of a fun thing for people who like to cook, you know, to just get different things and experiment in the kitchen and obviously be, you know, doing something good for the environment and everything at the same time. So really encourage you guys to check out that program. It's awesome.
Well, if nobody has any questions, I'm going to pass this over to Greg and Marissa, who can speak about what they're doing at our kitchen in Millvale right now, the Good Food Project, and get you guys cooking.
Awesome. Thanks so much, David.
Of course.
Sorry, just unmuting ourselves here. My name is Marissa Fogel. This is Greg Austin. I'm the Program Director of Strategic Projects for 412 Food Rescue. And Greg is the Good Food Project Manager and Culinary Lead here at the Good Food Project. This particular program at 412 Food Rescue was originally conceived through the Upprize competition, where we developed a concept because even though we were taking food and rescuing it and redistributing it back out into the community, we still were experiencing waste. And so we wanted to find a way to continue to capture all of that waste and turn it into meals. So we operate here out of the Millvale Food and Energy Hub, which is here in Millvale. And we have two partners here through this location, one of which is New Sun Rising, which is a nonprofit incubator which specifically assists organizations who are trying to develop a concept or an organization to respond to either an environmental issue or food insecurity, etc. And then we also are here with Sprezzatura, which is a for-profit Italian restaurant who functions as well out of our kitchen. And Sprezzatura is also involved in our community takeout program and does donations and contributions to the community organizations. So right now, the way that the Good Food Project operates is to take surplus food, so food that would otherwise go into the waste stream, and turn it into healthy and delicious meals for our nonprofit partners. So we have currently the model is based around kind of a commitment catering style, where we create on average 500 meals a week that go to 6 nonprofits who take the meals that we create and distribute them out into the community. This particular model was really built to test concept, to prove that we could take surplus food and keep our meal costs significantly lower than that of a typical restaurant. So by comparison, for community takeout, cost per meal is approximately $5. Here at the Good Food Project, our cost per meal is approximately 8 cents. So we use 99% donated food to create meals that we distribute back into the community. So now that we've been able to do this for about a year and prove the concept that yes, we can take donated food, consistently turn it into meals, we wanted to test how that would work in a revenue-based model. So we're currently in the process of launching a 3-compartment meal program where we will generate approximately 1,000 meals a week here in the kitchen to be sold in the market, and people can use their SNAP benefits to purchase these meals at an extremely low cost. So by creating an opportunity for us to keep our costs significantly lower than those in the rest of the market, we create an opportunity for folks to buy a meal at potentially half the price that they would normally pay for a healthy meal that they can take home and purchase with their SNAP benefits. That particular part of our program right now is in research and development. We plan to have a minimum viable product prototype by September 1st with a soft launch at the end of this year. And then starting next year, we'll begin to do a formal launch of this portion of the project. So that's kind of our overview of what we do here. Does anybody have any questions about?
I have one, and this might not be one you guys can answer because I recognize you're not in that in other spaces other than the one of your own, but how does that compare to like a Meals on Wheels? I mean, 8 cents is incredible that you're using all of that repurposed food and you're able to get that out to people, but how does that compare to other programs who are doing similar things from a cost perspective?
Yeah, I mean, so the fact that we are able to keep our costs significantly low means that we can invest in other portions of the project, such as additional staff, so that we can create more meals. Whereas if you are limited by the costs that you would experience just in purchasing the food, you can't necessarily use those funds to build out another portion of your program. I do want to mention, though, that here at the Good Food Project, we only have 2 full-time staff, and the majority of our work is supported by volunteer efforts as well, in keeping with the 412 food rescue model.
So does that mean as a volunteer, I could come in and help cook?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. I didn't realize that. That's very cool.
Yeah.
It's a slow Saturday morning with questions. I think people are rolling out of bed.
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to hand it over to Greg, and he can talk about, he's actually using some of the produce that we received this week to create a dish here, and I'm happy to hand it over to Greg if the time is right.
Is there a question on the 917 number? It just popped up.
Yeah, hey Allison, it's Kat. I had a question. Do you do like group volunteer events, like where, you would allow a group to come in and cook with you or something like that?
So in general, yes. And David also works with our volunteers to create opportunities for groups to come and assist with all of our programs at 412 Food Rescue. Currently at the kitchen, due to COVID-19, we are keeping volunteer interactions to a bare minimum, just for the safety of all of those involved. We want to make sure that if we need additional assistance, that it's really essential. But yes, in general, there are plenty of opportunities for groups to come here to help process the food that we receive through donations throughout the week. Because I think a lot of people don't necessarily have all of the experience with cooking. It takes a lot just in preparation and in processing the food that you get in before you even get to a cooking or distribution phase. So there's plenty of opportunities to help.
I also can put my contact information in the chat over here if you're ever looking for group volunteer opportunities. Like Marissa said, because of COVID-19, we're definitely being very cautious on group opportunities and restricting some of our normal group volunteer opportunities. But we do have some options out there available, specifically some of the large-scale distributions we're doing. So if you do have a group that wants to volunteer in Pittsburgh, we can certainly get you out there together.
I had one question. Can I ask? My question was, as you all are looking to expand into different cities, and I guess this also goes into asking how you've been expanding, as you go along, what kinds of things are you all looking for in terms of the layout or the setup of whatever city you're moving to or region that you're moving to, in order to figure out like what you need in order to get started?
So it's pretty simple in regards to getting started. It's a matter of having the right organization to take on this responsibility. So to launch in a new city, it's going to be at the will of that city. We're not necessarily recruiting cities, more so we're allowing cities to recruit our technology. Obviously, we're letting them know about it. But basically, if we want to launch into a new city, there needs to be one organization that has a mission of fighting against food waste, food insecurity, or both. And then essentially, you need to have one food donor, one nonprofit, and one volunteer. So if there was a city, and there's a cost associated with it. So let's go ahead and say Detroit wanted to use our technology. There would need to be some sort of organization that is fighting against food waste, fighting against food insecurity, that has made contacts with at least one food donor and at least one nonprofit so that they can say that we have a basis to get started on right here. It's been pretty inspiring in Northern Virginia. That was a partner of ours that we didn't necessarily know too much about how the Food Rescue Hero operation would work there, but it's not big cities. Prince William County is the area that uses it, and they've really taken off the ground running with it because they've done a tremendous job getting a lot of food donors on board, getting a lot of nonprofits on board, and then getting a large volunteer network. So it's really about expanding those networks, and but it really just takes one volunteer, one donor, one organization to license the software, and they can get running with it.
Thanks.
Katie G, do you want to ask your question?
Oh, I was just wondering was there a local restaurant that you said shares the 412 kitchen? And if so, which restaurant that is, so we can also support their business?
Yes, so we share a kitchen here with Sprezzatura, which is kind of a traditional Italian, kind of almost like a home cooked meal style of food. And they also are a part of our community takeout program, creating 700 meals a week through community takeout for the community. So they would love your support. They still, right now, are doing takeout lunch and dinner Wednesday through Sunday. And we can both testify that the food is delicious.
Thank you.
I just dropped a link to their website in the comments over there, so if you want to.
Oh, thank you, David. Thank you.
Yeah.
Should we hand this over to Greg?
I think so. Let's get cooking.
Great.
I'm excited too. I've got my setup here, so I'm cooking along with you, Greg.
Very nice. So let's see if we can get situated here. This is what we're looking at. Can you see anything really clearly? I've started by already cooking the bacon just because I didn't want to run over time. So go ahead and splash a little bit of oil in your pan. Yeah, and just, what I did was I took a strip of bacon and I just snipped angles all the way up. And I think all you're really looking for is 1/4 cup of bacon fat. So for me, that was about 4 strips. And you're just looking for enough to coat your Brussels sprouts, which is what you see here. I got started on. I'll give you a minute to do that.
Let's talk about what alternatives you can use. We talked about this before we jumped on because I'm using Napa cabbage.
Right. So yeah, I ended up using some Brussels sprouts, some of the farm. I tried to make this recipe based on the farm to families boxes just a little bit. So that's where the baby carrots come in. And they usually come with a head of cabbage as well. I didn't get any cabbage in my box this week, so I'm using Brussels sprouts instead. You can use butter for substituting for bacon fat, and it's the same measurements. You're just looking for 1/4 cup. All right, so we'll just turn the heat up on these sprouts while Allison works out her bacon. And this is the result you want from your bacon, if you want to take a look there. You know.
And Greg, as you're going, can you talk a little bit about what are some of the meals, what are some typical meals that you guys are cooking in the Millvale Kitchen that are going out to folks?
Oh, we try and do we end up doing 2 or 3 different types of meals throughout the week, on any given week. Because again, it's all donation based. We do buy a few supplementary ingredients if we just don't get everything that we need. But it's heavily donation based. So, we've done anything you can think of, we've probably done it. We just did fish tacos this week. A month ago it was stroganoff. So we get a lot of practice and a lot of different recipes, and we make up some stuff as we go as well. Mostly the focus is a balanced meal. I try and keep it interesting. I try and keep it at the same time exciting and accessible. So we end up with sometimes a sort of interesting take on a classic, but most of our donations are very produce heavy, and the supplementals usually end up being staples like flour or butter. But yeah, this recipe we just put out as a vegetable side dish 2 weeks ago because we ended up with some unclaimed CFAP family to farm sauces. So we had carrots, and that's how I ended up with this recipe. How are you coming along with the bacon there, Allison?
Don't wait for me. My bacon's going to take a little while to cook. I'll catch.
You're the control, so I know if everybody else is cooking along, where they're at.
Is anybody else cooking? I might be the only one cooking.
You might be the only one. That's true.
There was one other person, the last cooking live demo that we did that was cooking, so.
If I go too far or anything, let me know. But
Hey, Allison, I'm not cooking, but I'm listening because Brussels sprouts are my favorite.
Wonderful. So I've got my sprouts browning in the pan here in the bacon fat. You can be doing it in butter as well. And as soon as they're pretty much tender, I'll move them to a tray to cool, and then we'll get started on the carrots. But the goal, I guess, as far as waste goes with this recipe, the goal was to do a one-pan dish. I forgo the paper towels with my bacon, obviously.
Because bacon makes everything taste better.
Yeah, absolutely. Butter too.
If you eat meat, not for everyone.
Yeah. Sure.
So Greg, how did you get involved with 412 Food Rescue? Are you from Pittsburgh? Can you tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, I'm from about 2 hours from Pittsburgh. I've been here for 11 years now. I came here to learn how to cook, and I've been working in the food scene here through its entire kind of ascendance, and learning as I work and learning as I go. And then the last 5 years, I suppose, 4 or 5 years, I've been kind of out of the corner of my eye following 412 Food Rescue's ascendance and just wonderful things that they're doing and the impact that they're making. I had a few friends that started as the company started, and they have always had nothing but wonderful things to say about working for them, and the work that they're doing was making them really happy. And when the opportunity arose, I just happened to get to see it and be in the right place to take it, so I took it.
The program too, you're talking about kind of the food scene, Pittsburgh's ascendance as kind of a foodie town. There's a lot of people participating in the passports that aren't from here or that might be here and have kind of a limited exposure to the restaurant scene because of everything going on with COVID. Can you talk a little bit, and David, feel free to chime in too, about kind of how the food scene has transformed in Pittsburgh and what some of your favorite places are around town?
Well, there's just been a massive boom of restaurants that are, world restaurants or like national restaurants that are receiving acclaim on a national scale and bringing attention to the city. And obviously, with that, you end up with a large amount of waste. That's just the system that restaurants operate on. So these things are hand in hand. Obviously, the growth of one is the growth of the other, for now. There are so many great restaurants. I don't know about giving out shout outs. They're all, everybody in the industry is working really hard and putting out great products.
I'd like to kind of chime in on that. I think one of the things that I've noticed is a difference in the trend recently is I feel like there was this divide once upon a time where it was lower quality food and really expensive high quality food. And I think that a lot of chefs right now are finding ways to get really high quality, locally produced food into restaurants for a reasonable cost by, instead of doing white tablecloth service, doing counter service and making things more casual. And on the food waste side of things, I'm seeing more and more restaurants have smaller and smaller menus and actually sell out of products. So it's not this traditional thing where you have a 4-page menu and you're just kind of asking yourself to have food waste eventually. So I do think that there has been a change in the response from restaurateurs and chefs out there to provide better quality food and do it in a more equitable and environmentally friendly way.
Agreed. Thank you, David. Does that satisfy, Allison?
Yeah, that's great. David, how did you get involved with 412? And are you from Pittsburgh? As we're working to get students to stay here after graduation, the more kind of Pittsburgh ambassadors we can have, the better.
Yeah, I'm a Pittsburgh transplant. I'm from Buffalo, New York. And I came down to Pittsburgh a few years ago and was just looking for a change of career, was working at a couple of restaurants at the time. And then I made a full transition to work for a tech company and then learned a lot in that process, but wanted to get back into the world of food. And 412 Food Rescue is this perfect way to use my interest in food and my passion for reducing food waste, but also with the skills and knowledge that I learned for working for a tech company and having this in between of being a tech company and a nonprofit that is creating food, saving food, and serving people food. It's which is kind of a serendipitous situation.
Awesome. Did you leave your Bills allegiance behind, or are you still a Bills fan?
I would never leave my Bills allegiance behind.
Okay, I'm from Cleveland and I love Pittsburgh, but I'm a Browns fan too, so don't tell anyone.
It's okay.
If you guys will see, I've got the carrots. I used orange juice. Water is perfectly fine. The orange juice will just add a little sweetness to the whole deal. And brown sugar, and I'm just going to stir that all together. The caraway seeds are also, I actually didn't put them in with the sprouts as the recipe I think suggests. I'll just put them right in with this mixture so they'll soften up a little more. And just stir that together and bring it to a boil. This takes a while. This is kind of why I got a head start, because this will probably take us right to the end. Just put your carrots down.
I'll just keep cooking once we finish because my bacon's still going. I know the steps, so we're all good.
And Greg, what are you looking for to happen with the carrots here? What's the end result that we're waiting for?
Fork tender in basically a thick glaze.
Okay.
You'll reduce the sugar and the orange juice will reduce and coat the carrots. And, like a classic, almost, I don't even know what it would be, Dutch or like Thanksgiving style soft cake.
Yeah. Has there been any food that has come in from the farm to family boxes, any type of produce that's been a challenge to use, or is the problem solving juice is always flowing?
That's most of the time everything is easy to and works together. Head lettuce is really difficult for us just because of our time frame.
Right.
It's when we get it, it's usually on its way out, and we have to use it right away, and we just aren't always prepared to do that, especially in COVID times. We just, if we don't have a volunteer force to break down 3 cases of head lettuce, that's been difficult. That's probably the most challenging thing, and it's also difficult to put out a salad in a prepackaged meal.
Right.
You can't dress it for them. It's just a little tricky, so we're still working that out. But most of the time, we've been able to utilize, I don't know, at least anywhere from 80 to 95% of what we get.
Is there any way, this is a quick, does somebody else just jump in? Go ahead, Kat.
Yeah, hi, I'm Katie.
Hi.
I just had a question on that note. So one thing personally that I've been trying to do more at home is composting. So you have things like you try really hard to use everything, but there's always some things that are just absolutely unusable, they're rotten, or there's just parts of things that you just can't use in any other way.
Yeah.
Do you guys see or think that we're going to see a bigger movement on composting? It's something that maybe I'm just not seeing it, but I feel like it's not as prevalent as maybe I think it should be.
I think it's certainly growing. Here's my little compost bucket for the day, all my little Brussels.
Oh, yay!
In the industry here, at least right now, it's pretty easy for a restaurant or a production facility to compost because there are companies like Zero Waste Wrangler who make it easy. They leave you a bin. It's like a trash service, I think depending on your area, that challenge changes and the ins and outs of that challenge change. But I do think there is a rise in understanding of, zero waste lifestyle or how to incorporate compost into your world.
Can I jump in first?
Please, and I'll pass to Marissa to further explain.
I'll just jump in for a little bit because I'm a little bit of a nerd about this. I actually have been doing composting at home now for almost 20 years. And I think that one of the things about it that is particularly challenging is that there are 2 different kinds of ways to compost. So you can compost at home, which you can either use a vermicomposting bin, which is something that you can literally keep under your kitchen sink and throw your scraps into. It's filled with regular worms and they eat all of your stuff. It never smells. It's very easy to maintain. And very easy to construct using either wooden boxes or Rubbermaid bins. The other option for home composting is to have a composting bin in your backyard where you can place your scraps to compost over time outdoors. And there are a lot of instructions online about how to go about doing something like that if you have the backyard space. And you really don't need a lot of space for either one of those options. The problem with home composting is that it's very limiting in terms of what you can compost. So industrial composting goes through, as opposed to a natural process, goes through a chemical process. And as a result, you can compost things industrially that you wouldn't be able to compost at home. So at home, you can only really compost things like eggshells, produce waste, anything that kind of grows in and out of the ground. But once it's cooked, once it has oil on it, once it has salt on it, once it has animal fats, things like animal bones, meat, dairy, cheese can't be composted at home. For multiple different reasons. One, because of toxicity that can potentially be created in the compost in that process. And B, because it attracts a lot of critters and things that could potentially cause other problems in and around your area. So I think kind of what Greg is illuminating, and I think it's important to consider that, commercial composting or industrial composting is really the way to get everybody involved and create a situation where we can dramatically reduce waste. Although I will say, if you do make the choice to compost at home, you'll see a significant reduction in your just the garbage that you create.
Oh yeah, definitely. I already have. And like you said, it is kind of limiting because you can only do those, you know, produce items and the eggs and stuff like that. But honestly, once I started, I was kind of surprised at how much I really was putting out, even though I try to use as much as I can. And there's even certain things that I'll make like stock with, you know, I save them in the freezer and stock up and make like stock with them. But I still have so many things that I just didn't even realize how much was really going out. So I guess personally, I'm hoping to get to a point where maybe it's like recycling. Like I know my municipality offers recycling just along with our trash. I think it'd be great if one day there was like, you know, a municipality level of composting like that. I think we're obviously a bit far from that, but you know, it is really reassuring to hear to me that there are these services for the restaurants, because that's not really something that I knew of or was familiar of, or when I was in restaurants, that wasn't something I ever saw.
Right, and I think, you know, it goes in hand with the things that David was talking about in the restaurant culture here. You know, people are just, there's a new wave of how to approach restaurateurship.
It's definitely a responsibility, and I know personally that's how I became so passionate about the food waste and wanting to be involved with 412 Food Rescue is being in the food industry for so long and seeing the waste that it's actually putting out. It's really shocking when you see it firsthand, and you know, there's a level of responsibility.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, the difficulty with composting at home is not everybody has land to
absolutely
buy their compost, and that's what Marissa was speaking to as far as, and what you're speaking to. Maybe eventually there will be more cooperation with the industries that do exist, being able to kind of scale their operations to homes as well, to domestic. Right. Let's hope.
Yeah.
Well, Katie, here's my compost bucket. So,
hey.
All right, I gotta check in with Greg real fast.
Yeah.
I think my bacon's looking good, I think.
Perfect bacon, look at that.
All right.
So where are you?
I think it's done, we're ready for the carrots.
So where I'm at with the carrots, your cabbage is done too, Allison?
Yeah, cabbage is done. I'm gonna put the carrots in next. So you're
take the cabbage and put it in something else. Or start a separate pan for your carrots. I take it out. So here's where I'm at with the carrots, but I've got my cabbage, so to speak, separate over here, already cooked, ready to be mixed in later.
Real quick question. I'm making it too. I got a really late start, so I'm incredibly behind.
Okay.
But I'm not bothered by that. I'm doing Brussels sprouts too. Should I cook them, like roast them in a separate pan? Is that better than doing it stovetop with the bacon?
You know what I do is I'll separate. Have you gotten the bacon started yet?
No, it's not cooking yet.
Okay. I try and do everything in one pan when I do this, but if you, for time constraint reasons or for whatever reason, want to do two pans, you can. Essentially, I cook the bacon, I take the bacon out, and I cook the cabbage or sprouts in the bacon fat or butter or whatever. And then I take that out, and then I start the carrots with their kind of drizzle.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
The cabbage is delicious.
Good. Look at that. And cooked in bacon fat, right?
It is.
I think one more thing, you know, here that, you know, will eventually become a part of the Good Food Project in much more of a regular way is food education. So kind of getting back to how to utilize waste and thinking about waste in the context of compost or other ways. You know, Katie brought up a really interesting point about something that we call here circular cooking, which is really taking our waste and trying to find ways to continue to apply it in other portions of a recipe And it might be in an incredibly small way. It could be, like Katie said, using scraps to create stock. Or last week, after we squeezed these oranges, we used the peels to make marmalade. So we're trying to find kind of at every moment how we can take what we're cutting away, of course, not using anything that's rotten or should be discarded, but trying to use as much of the plant or the protein or whatever that we receive. And I think that part of cooking education is definitely talking about how to create a nutritionally balanced meal, techniques and methods around cooking. But I think it also extends to, how do we find ways to utilize everything that's in our kitchen so that when we open our refrigerator, we see abundance instead of scarcity.
And this is something that I honestly learned through working in restaurants. When it's, a profit or loss margin, it's real easy to want to use as much of everything as you can. And it teaches you how to value, not only what you have in your fridge, but the work that went into it, and the effects that it can have as waste versus the effect that it can have as food.
Yeah, and something I was gonna say on this topic is I feel like this is something that maybe 60 years ago was very commonplace. Like, it was very common for a family to be on a limited budget. The mom was home a lot, and I think that's some of the misconception behind it, is that cooking in general and grocery shopping, it can be very overwhelming when you're a busy person. I firsthand, I'm sure we all know that, when you have a full-time job, when you have a family, it's very overwhelming to think, like, you want me to compost? You want me to reuse these products? Like, you want me to make my own stock? But at the end of the day, some of this stuff can be done, like, incredibly easily. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. So I definitely think that education aspect is so important. And it's something that I personally try to advocate a lot, because, I have friends that are like, wait, what are you doing? Why would you do that? Or how do you have time to do that? But with stock, it's as easy as saving that up in the freezer, putting it in a crock pot overnight, and you have stock. You can do it with bones. You can do it with the vegetables. I mean, I'm always making all different types of stocks, or like you even said with the orange peels, like I've made cleaners like with vinegar, and you're literally just putting what you have in a bottle of vinegar and letting it sit for weeks. I mean, it's so simple, but people, I think they get that connotation that it's going to be a lot harder, a lot more work, but it's not.
And to that, I think there's definitely a large movement of people who are recognizing, we can call it old world style living as something that we want to return to, and especially in regards to food and the waste that we're producing, and sorry, real quick. That's something that we're doing, as far as our productivity model and what we need to do, because there is stuff because our goal is zero waste, or our goal is as little waste as possible. Thinking about pickles and jams and just remembering, things that maybe our grandparents or their parents did to not waste and to not run out is the model that we're all looking at, for sure. Food preservation on small scales, everything like that. But yeah. Go on.
Absolutely. I was just going to say, and I think part of this movement is also coming from what we are now seeing in this short amount of time, what has happened to our world and our climate because of these practices that we're having. So I think a lot more people with seeing, what is actually happening to our climate because of just our meat consumption alone is getting a lot of people to start thinking, okay, I need to really do my part here, because this is actually a really big problem. So it is really reassuring that I do think it's becoming a lot more people are thinking about it. I definitely just want to see more people understand like how easy it can be, and to just feel more responsible. Like, it genuinely is our part. Like, when I go back to restaurants, I say that I feel like there's a level of responsibility. I feel like we all should feel this at this point. So I love 412 Food Rescue. Here's like my soapbox. I love this. I will do anything for you guys. I think this is the best cause in the world. So yeah.
Thanks for your contributions, Katie. This is awesome. It's good to have you know, every day, not to call you every day, but every day people jumping in to really show their passion about this. Quick question for me and James, Greg.
Yes.
Carrots are going. Am I just letting this simmer so that it kind of reduces down to more up?
Yes, exactly. I've got mine at like this position here. I don't know if you can see what's going on there. Yeah, let me see yours. Yeah, that's great. You can even turn the heat up a little bit there.
Okay.
It's like just a very lightly rolling boil. It's a hard simmer. And I've had to add more liquid to mine to get them softer. Basically, feel free to add a cup of water and just let that cook down and reduce, and then do it again if they're not. And just poke them with a fork whenever it gets to be real glazy. And you'll just go until they're done. And at the end of it, you'll just throw everything all together. And that's it.
Cool. Well, I want to be mindful of time. James, you and I are going to be cooking beyond noon, I think. But my kitchen smells wonderful. David, Katie, Marissa, thank you guys so much for your time. Did I just say David, Katie, Marissa? David, Marissa, Greg, and Katie too, because you're now our like sidebar 412 rep. Keep an eye on job openings at 412. You'd be perfect there.
Always.
Thank you guys all for joining us. I'm just going to throw up a few upcoming events. I know not everyone joining us is a student, and most of the Passport series is for students, but we actually have another event. I can get this to advance tomorrow, or I'm sorry, Monday with the Science Center about science denialism in the 21st century. So kind of along these same lines, people who don't think climate change is real or are against vaccinations or think COVID was created in a lab. The Science Center is really kind of digging into why people can't be convinced otherwise of data and science and kind of what's behind that. So it should be a really interesting conversation that anyone is welcome to join. And then we have a couple tech talks this week. Bosch is going to talk about their partnership with NASA on SoundSea and how Pittsburgh is kind of on the map in space. And then on Thursday, the 16th, why Pittsburgh? Talking to interns who are now working full-time in tech companies in Pittsburgh and kind of what the tech scene is like here. And lastly, for anyone on who has interest in the case competition, submissions are due on Monday, and you can find all the information on upcoming events in the case on pittsburghpassport.com. Again, everyone from 412, thank you so much for your time. And as we always say, stay well, be kind, and we'll see you soon. Thanks so much, everyone.